Okay, thank you for the Kingston. This should be okay. All right, we began emotional intimacy last time, and I decided there were quite a few things that we hadn't covered, and I was right. So we're going to finish some of that, even though I didn't really do that tonight. We began talking about building positive sentiment in our marriage, to bring in those positive feelings by being aware of positive things that are already happening, and then we talked about ways to create more positivity. For those of you who were here or watched the video, you may remember that. Tonight we're going to talk a little bit more about emotional intimacy, talking, listening, and then connecting, and we're going to talk a little bit about dating. So first I'd like to talk about some of these communication skills with talking. This is a picture of Martin Seligman, and he is kind of the father of positive psychology. Abnormal psychology is kind of what most people are familiar with, where you talk about depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, things like that. Martin Seligman, he has developed this branch of psychology called positive psychology, in which they study healthy people rather than mental illness. And they look at how we can take normal, healthy people and help them thrive and get even better and happier and more productive in their lives. And he's looked at communication, emotional intimacy, and he's identified these 4 ways that we can respond in a conversation. The first here is active, constructive communication, to respond authentically, enthusiastically, or supportively. Okay, honey, Bishop just gave me a new calling. Wow, that's really cool. What are your duties going to be? Tell me all about. What did he say? When do you start? Okay, being interested in what our spouse has to say. Out of the 4 styles here, this is the only one that we want you to do. Okay, so the next 3 are examples of what I don't want you to do. Passive constructive communication is to offer brief, unspecific support. Hey, honey, Bishop just gave me a new calling. Oh, that's nice. What are we having for lunch? Right? Okay. Passive destructive communication is to ignore the stimulus rather than addressing it. Hey, honey, guess what? The bishop just gave me a new calling today. Hey, did you know the fire alarm is beeping down the hallway? So it didn't even address at all. And I don't know if you've ever had those experiences. I've had experiences like that, and it's very painfully invalidating to the person who's trying to communicate.
I've done that. So.
I actually wasn't talking about you. I'll talk about you later. You'll get to be embarrassed later today. Okay, active destruction communication is to point out the negative aspects of the stimulus. Hey, honey, the bishop just gave me a new calling today. Oh my gosh, do you know how much time that's going to take? Oh, you are going to be so stressed out. Okay? So what we want you to encourage you to do is active, constructive communication. We are actively involved and working with your spouse in a positive way to show interest in them. I mixed up their names. Anyway, Brinley and Ogletree are LDS marriage therapists that have also looked at communication. They've identified 3 levels of communication that we can have in our conversations with our spouse. The first is superficial level, which is informative and low risk. You're sticking to the weather and the job and the details of life. Personal level, you're sharing deeper parts of yourself, such as goals and dreams. Or the validating level, you're really connecting with each other, and you may even praise and compliment each other. They said this about the superficial level. Superficial communication can supplant deep and meaningful conversations. If couples tiptoe around deeper issues that should be discussed, they will never learn to resolve conflict or connect with each other. Couples bond as they discuss things that matter, not things that don't. I have seen many couples in my practice who have tried to preserve their relationship by keeping their communication at the superficial level. By avoiding the weightier matters, they've actually destroyed their marriage. I don't know if you've had experiences in your life where you've tried to be safe and you've tried to restrict what you talk about, and it does put massive barriers in your relationships, not just with spouse, but with children or other relationships as well. So think about how you're talking with your spouse as you're interacting with them. As you're thinking about talking with them, I also want you to think about the importance of listening. And this is a very important process as well. We here have a caution by Neil A. Maxwell to the talker in the marriage. We often have one of us that likes to talk a little more than the others. Stereotypically, it's the women, but not necessarily. And he offers this counsel. Let our service at times include a willingness to hold back in conversation when what we would have said has already been said, and perhaps better. To contribute time and space so that another can expand is to reflect quiet nobility. There are so many times when to forego is to make way for another. So let's also remember to talk, and as one person is talking, we listen. So I kind of try to remind myself, since I tend to be the talker in our marriage, that God gave me one mouth but 2 ears. And so I need to work at listening and trying to draw out sometimes when I've been talking for a long time and I realize I haven't heard anything from my husband. So be mindful of the talking and listening aspects. And another piece of emotional intimacy that I want to cover tonight is the idea of connection. The whole point of this is, as we talk about avoiding the superficial level and avoiding the active destructive and the active passive communications, is we want to connect, and we want to connect in a positive way. So this is a quote by author Brene Brown. She's a researcher from the social work area, and she's written some popular psychology social work books. She's given TED Talks. She's on YouTube and things that you can look at her. And she has said this: connection is the energy that is created between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment. And that would be our hope. I hope for all of our relationships is that we can be seen and feel like we're being seen by our spouse and valued. So how can we do that? It's difficult to make space for connection, and yet that's what I want to talk about doing. So sometimes we have busy lives. Some of us have lots of kids, and it's tough because you do have to talk about kids, you do have to talk about jobs and schedules and things like that. So how do you create time to connect? So I wanted to emphasize the importance, as the brethren have talked about maintaining an ongoing dating relationship with our spouse, which may not always seem intuitive, right? We date, we're trying to win someone over, and then when you got them, you're like, oh, I don't have to try anymore. But the dating is about creating space to connect so that we have the opportunity to continue to build and deepen a relationship. And that's something my husband and I are still working on, trying to improve the frequency since we have all these young children at home. It's been tough for us to get out for dates, and some of the times our date constitutes going out on the back deck and looking at the view after the kids have gone to bed. But if that's what you can do, you can do. So since we want to create space for connection on these dates, we don't want to talk about this superficial communication stuff. So I'm going to give you some dating conversation rules. I don't want you talking about jobs, kids, problems, health issues, etc., business. This is the time to connect on this deeper level. Dreams, hopes, fears, fantasies. Plan your next vacation. Think about when the kids are going to get out of the house. For those of you who are like me, I need them gone. So it's a challenge if you have to shift your conversation style, but I give you the challenge to try it. Try to go on a date and not talk about any of the businessy, superficial things, such as the jobs and the schedules and things like that. So hopes, dreams, fears, ideas, theories, or politics, although you might want to avoid politics lately. Gospel insights and how they apply to your life. Plan future vacations or trips, or fantasize when the kids will be out of the house, and you can come up with more of your own ideas. But those are some of the things that can really help you connect on a deeper level with your spouse. So in order to do that, you need to kind of be thoughtful about the kind of activities that you're going to do on your date. And here's our theory, and you may disagree, but this is just our theory. The more you pay someone to entertain you on your date, the less you interact with each other. I love going to the theater or the movies, right? But how much do you really interact with the person you're with, except for maybe intermission if you're at a live? So we encourage you to be broad thinking about the kinds of activities you do on your dates. So our little suggestion is the cheaper the date, the more interaction. I don't know, think about that. You think that's true? Do you go for a walk? No money at all, but it might be the best date you've ever had. We love sitting on the back deck after the kids have gone to bed for our dates. That's one of the best dates we have, when we actually can sit and connect. So think about activities that will promote interaction, not just going and doing something fun. Now, of course, it's nice to go to the theater and do things like that every once in a while, but if that's your default, where you're going and sitting while someone entertains you, you're not really doing a whole lot of good quality interacting with your spouse. So just think about that and be a little bit creative with that. Okay, and what I want to do here as we finish emotional intimacy, I want you to think about broadening your definition of intimacy. Stereotypically, women define intimacy as talking, emotional intimacy as talking. Stereotypically, men define intimacy as sexual relationships. And I want you to expand that. Because in those gender-specific stereotypes of talking and sex, it's kind of like taking an 88-key piano and hitting one note over and over. Okay, you men are tired of your wives talking for 6 hours at a time, right? Okay, and if the key that men are keep hitting is sexual relations over and over and over and over again, and that's the only way they can connect, I tell you, your wives are tired of it. Okay? So expand your idea of intimacy. I've got some ideas here. Intellectual intimacy. You're doing that tonight. Attend a lecture where you might learn something new. Talk about what you're learning. Watch a documentary. Athletic. Go rock climbing or hiking together or go for a walk. Spiritual intimacy. Listen to a conference talk and discuss how it relates to you and your family, or read scriptures together and ponder and discuss the applications of those scriptures. Artistic. Go to a museum or do an art project together. Academic. Take a community education class together. Or how fun would this be? Learn a new language together. It'd be fun. Wasn't it Elder Irene and his wife who did that when we got called on a mission once? Shared purpose, work on a project together, family history, house projects, planning a family reunion, or professional involvement. This idea of shared purpose has been a massive one for Richard and myself as we've thought about these ideas, we've written about them, we've created presentations and done it together. It has been the biggest boost to our marriage. And it's not just because we're talking about marriage and we are reminding ourselves of everything we're not doing that we should be doing. But it's because we're working together on something that feels meaningful and important to both of us. So find something that you kind of have a shared purpose with that you can do together. And that's a massive boost to intimacy. And the last one I put on here, musical. Attend a concert together or sing in a choir together. And I'm sure you can think of others. If you think about intimacy in this way, then creating and planning your dates becomes pretty easy, or the time that you spend together. Because you can say, hey, you know, we haven't really hit the intellectual area recently. Why don't we go to this lecture I heard was being played, or let's go to this museum. You know, we haven't really done anything artistic lately. And so it can kind of help you have a wider range of activities that you do, and that's just going to be more interesting too and more fun. Okay, so with that said, we'll move to physical intimacy. And we learn in the scriptures the importance of physical intimacy. Here in Mark 10, we read, "They twain shall be one flesh, so then they are no more twain, but one flesh. What therefore God hath joined together, let not man put asunder." So the sexual relationship is important throughout the lifespan. So even in the elder years, sexuality is important. Research has shown that people between ages of 65 and 75, 50% of people, couples mainly, are still sexually active. And above age 75, 25% are still active. And the only reason for the decline, it's not a decline in sexual interest, but it's simply age-related or health-related issues of mobility or disease process, things like that tend to get in the way of sexual behavior. But sexuality is important throughout the lifespan. Research has found that sexual inactivity and dissatisfaction are associated with marital unhappiness and divorce. So let's look at something that President Spencer W. Kimball said. It can be difficult, let's see, anecdotally I can say, especially for women, but I think for men also. In the LDS culture, healthy sexuality is not really talked about very much. I think that was addressed in one of the conference talks in the women's section this last time, that we need to find ways to talk about sexuality in a healthy way. And so it can often, stereotypically, be difficult for women in the church who've been counseled to remain sexually not active and sexually pure before marriage, and then all of a sudden to be sexually active after marriage. It can seem a little awkward. And for some, they really struggle feeling like even it's okay. And so Spencer W. Kimball says this: sex is for procreation and expression of love. In the context of lawful marriage, the intimacy of sexual relations is right and divinely approved. There is nothing unholy or degrading about sexuality in itself, for by that means men and women join in a process of creation and in an expression of love. So I like this statement from this is a Christian author, non-LDS. They wrote a book about sexuality in the Christian marriage, and they just summarized it this way: you have God's permission to enjoy sex within your marriage. And that can be helpful for some people who struggle with the idea that for some reason perhaps sexuality is dirty or evil because it wasn't appropriate when they weren't married. So I've had some married people come in my office even say, I'm struggling, still feeling like this is a dirty thing. And we have to talk through this kind of process. In and of itself, there's nothing unholy or degrading about sexuality. Physical intimacy offers us two opportunities to learn about unity if we take it. Okay, it can become a very carnal process and we learn nothing. But if we allow it, it can teach us two things about it, unity. Unity with each other as husband and wife, and unity with God. So this first quote here by Jeffrey R. Holland addresses unity with each other, and he says this: human intimacy, that sacred physical union ordained of God for a married couple, is a symbol of total union of their hearts, their hopes, their lives, their love, their family, their future, their everything. So we had mentioned last time in our presentation that we got some stories randomly, anonymously, is what I meant. Anonymously from people about different aspects of their marriage. And I had some people who were willing to share about their sexual relationship as well, and I want to share this story with you. My husband and I were headed for a very unhappy marriage. I grew up in a women's lib home where I was taught that men only wanted one thing, and that the best thing to do was to bring their man into submission. To make my marriage wonderful, I had to change. Stepping outside of my selfish world changed everything. Sex is now no longer about me. I changed. When I don't desire sex, I desire his happiness, which means I will give myself to him. I end up with a double win because I have fulfilled his need and I feel great. And she continues, and I just messed it up. I hope that's not a confidential email that I just exposed. Sorry. I'll just continue with her story. Sex is no longer just about sex. It is a union between us that strengthens us. I try to give him all the physical affection that he personally needs. I do not withhold myself from him. And yes, sadly, I used to. Since I have changed myself, our marriage is a beautiful thing. My husband gives more and more to me. I then show appreciation and physical affection, then he gives more, and it continues on and on. So her story really illustrates something that we talked about in the last lecture, which was that trust and loyalty cycle, if you remember that. And as we invest trust and loyalty and we bring positive things in our relationship, it kind of ramps the relationship up, and we kind of talked about that. This is a similar process, that as we give to each other, we invest each other, it builds and brings that positivity into the relationship as well. Okay, the second opportunity that the sexual relationship gives us to learn about unity is to learn about unity with God. Ephesians tells us, "For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall be joined unto his wife, and they two shall be one flesh. This is a great mystery, but I speak concerning Christ and the church." Okay? So you get that? He's talking about sex, and then he says, "But I speak concerning Christ and the church." Christian authors say this: "Thus, the properly and lovingly executed and mutually satisfying sexual union is God's way of demonstrating to us a great spiritual truth. It speaks to us of the greatest love story ever told, of how Jesus Christ gave himself for us and is intimately involved with and loves the church, those who believe in him. In this framework, the sexual relationship between two growing Christians can be intimate fellowship as well as delight." I like the emphasis here on mutually satisfying sexual union, and that the sexual union is fully for both men and women. It is not just a male thing. We talked about emotional intimacy last time, and I was kind of trying to convert you to the idea that emotional intimacy is not just a woman thing. I'm going to now convert you to the idea that sexuality is not just a man thing, and that both experiences, emotional intimacy and physical intimacy, are both fully for both husband and wife. Jeffrey R. Holland says this about this idea of intimacy with God. Sexual relations as a sacrament, which he defines as any one of a number of gestures or acts or ordinances that unite us with God and his limitless powers. So he defines the act of sexual relationships with husband and wife as a sacrament within the gospel. Sexual union is also in its own profound way a very real sacrament of the highest order. A union not only of a man and a woman, but very much the union of that man and woman with God. So you think back to our earlier presentation, we talked about eternal marriage from the perspective not of length, but of quality. That eternal was another name for God. You remember that discussion from Doctrine and Covenants 19. Think about eternal marriage as God-like marriage. And you think about this sexual union bringing us into that eternal quality with God, that we learn much about union with God as we do about unity with each other. Okay, I got one more. Okay. Back off, he's excited. I'll let him talk after this. But so what we'd like to suggest is you think about the sexual relationship with your own marriage. Every person has a different relationship, and there's a wide range of relationships. But let us suggest, if you think about the eternal quality of marriage and using the sexual relationship, just as we talked about emotional intimacy, as a means of connection and unifying and elevating the marital relationship in a Christian way, we'll suggest that if one of you is feeling used or cheated or feeling left out relative to your sexual relationship, then the role of sexuality has become skewed in some way in that relationship. So I have 2 points here, and they kind of stereotypically address each gender. So the first point here I have is the purpose of sex is not to simply satisfy the male sex drive. I've had some experiences with clients in my therapy office, and these have been LDS couples, Temple Recommend Holding couples, and I've had women explain to me that they just feel very cold to their husbands. They don't want to even touch their hand or give them a hug or give them a kiss, because any affection at all leads to having to lead to sexual relationships every single time. Okay, that note on the piano, 88 keys, right? You're only hitting one again and again and again. So they become to the point where they're like, I don't even want to be nice to him because I'm just getting pressured all the time, all the time, all the time, all the time. Okay, that is not respecting their wife from the perspective of her needs. And again, if we think about the relationship as fully both for each of us, then if the stereotype is the man is more interested than the wife, then what I am suggesting is the man may need to be willing to have sexual relations less frequently than he would prefer. And I'm also suggesting that us women may need to be willing to have more sexual relationships than we might be inclined to have. And we have to come to each other. So just as in the emotional intimacy section, I've implied pretty clearly, so now I'm going to say explicitly, I'm saying men need to talk more and listen more and engage with their wives emotionally and verbally. I'm also suggesting women need to come along sexually and be willing to engage with their husbands more in that sexual relationship as well. And we both have to move towards each other. It's not about satisfying one person and the other person is left out and said, well, what about my needs? So both people, and it's this dance, you have to negotiate again and again and again. And then the second point here, this is stereotypically to women, but it may be to men as well. It's not appropriate to use sex as a tool to manipulate, control, or punish. And I've also seen that in my office. I've been faced with situations where women are forcing celibacy on their husbands. And men are having to go years and years without any kind of sexual relationship with their wives. And that's not appropriate. And that, based on what we've talked about the purpose of sex, you can kind of understand why at that point that would be the case. So it's an area of great sensitivity even within your own relationship, because stereotypically neither person, their sexual needs are going to be fully met, just like the emotional needs, right? Your wives might want to talk for 12 hours, men, and you might not want to listen, and then she's going to be unhappy if you stop at 10 hours, right? She wanted the other two. So stereotypically, none of us are going to be 100% satisfied, but we work to move towards each other because we care about the needs of our spouse. And if I care about him and he cares about me and we're moving towards each other, then it all kind of works out.
So, thank you. So, we live in a hypersexual world. Everything out there continues to be driven towards and completely skews relationships. And so I appreciate what Deborah said, because it's so important to have this self-discipline, both husband and wife in terms of that relationship. Now, I was a single man until I was 45. So I can tell you that one of the things that the world wants to teach is that sexuality is something that you can't control. Okay? That the libido, sex drive is something that you can't control. It can be controlled. And if you think about what it means, the brain is the sexual center of your body. Okay? It's the sexual organ of the body in terms of the priority. And so when you and I, particularly the men, okay, any kind of stimulus, whether we see something or whether we read or whatever, the control center is there. And that's the most important principle. Okay? And so in relationships, brethren, it's very important to be able to have and learn that self-discipline. Very important. And so I just want you to understand that it's a reality. It can happen. And those brethren, particularly who understand that, can learn that. The principle of discipline. Very important. Now, with that said, Elder Hunter said this: tenderness and respect, never selfishness, must be the guiding principles in the intimate relationship between husband and wife. Any domineering, indecent, or uncontrolled behavior in the intimate relationship between husband and wife is criminal idea. It's a very important self-discipline principle. I think it's very important to remember. President Kimball, this was a quote from a book from his biography. Dr. Homer Ellsworth once asked what sexual conduct was accepted for a married couple. President Kimball replied that, in his view, anything mutually pleasurable and satisfying is acceptable, but neither should pass the conduct with other countenance. So again, this is a partnership, something that we work together and we communicate.
Okay, so we're going to now move to conflict, which is another big one that we experience in our relationships in life. And I'm going to be presenting to you mainly the research of John Gottman. He is the nation's foremost leading marriage researcher. Did I introduce him last time? I talked about him? Okay. He talks about conflict that is so lethal to marriage that he calls it the four horsemen of the apocalypse. That is a metaphor coming from the book of Revelation. The four horsemen of the apocalypse are sent by Jesus to bring death to the majority of humanity on the last judgment. So he says these things are so bad that they will bring death to your marriage if they are present in a fairly regular, consistent manner. So we're going to talk about these. There's four of them: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. If there is an ongoing presence of these things in your marriage, they can predict divorce with about an 82% accuracy. And when these things occur, if someone